to find himself charged with distorting Wittgenstein's views by those who have a different response to them. This might, dismayingly, seem to suggest that there will never be a consensus about what Wittgenstein meant. I do not, however, think such pessimism warranted, for it seems to me that the literature on Wittgenstein already contains substantial agreement about which themes are most central to his work. This is not to deny that difficulties remain, but it does mean that one can identify with some confidence the aspects of Wittgenstein's work which should be discussed in an introduction like this. Like anyone writing about Wittgenstein, however, I must, to be properly cautious, add that the views I attribute to him are what I interpret those views to be. The qualification, "as I read him, Wittgenstein means," should therefore be understood throughout. The second of the two aims mentioned above is less difficult to attain. It is to situate Wittgenstein's work in 20th-century analytic philosophy. This is a narrow aim, for it is not at all the same thing as situating his work in 20th-century thought in general. To relate Wittgenstein's ideas to currents in literature and art, or to speculate whether, say, his early work is modernist and his late work postmodernist, or to search for the wellsprings of his philosophy in the intellectual ferment of pre-1914 Vienna, this is not the task I set myself in what follows. Such a task would be interesting and in many ways valuable, but here I fasten upon what is immediately relevant only. Wittgenstein's work, considered strictly in its philosophical aspects, is in general taken to belong to the mainstream of recent and contemporary analytic philosophy. It is in this setting that I discuss it. It should, however, be mentioned that Wittgenstein's name, and occasionally one or other of his ideas, also appears in writings on anthropology, theology, literary theory, and other subjects. Philosophers in continental Europe, whose recent traditions of thought are rather different from those in the English-speaking analytic tradition, have likewise come to pay attention to Wittgenstein's work. A detailed study might take these wider considerations into account, but here, as remarked, I concentrate on Wittgenstein's thought in its primary setting. Judging whether any value attaches to the use made of it in these other spheres in any case depends on first understanding the ideas themselves. Nevertheless, here and there I point out connections with other fields. This happens mainly in discussion of Wittgenstein's later views. Exposition and explanation take more room than criticism in what follows. This is because space is limited, and my primary task is to make the main aspects of Wittgenstein's thought accessible to non-philosophers. It is, however, part of such a proceeding to indicate what critical responses have been evoked by a thinker's views, and to provide some indication of the degree to which those views are persuasive or otherwise, and why. Accordingly, I make some brief and untechnical forays in this direction. In discussing the relation between Wittgenstein's work and other 20th-century analytic philosophy, I offer minor revisions to the standard view. My suggestion being that Wittgenstein's place in recent philosophy, in terms of his actual effect upon its content and direction, is not quite what it is usually said to be. Introductory books should encourage their readers to investigate at first hand the subjects with which they deal. In some cases, however, it is simply too ambitious to expect non-specialist readers to do this without first acquiring a substantial minimum of background knowledge. Wittgenstein is such a case. Despite claims by his followers to the contrary, he is very much a philosopher's philosopher. His writings, like those of Aristotle, Kant, and certain others, cannot be read with profit by someone who does not have at least a modest grounding in philosophy, for their point would be wholly obscure to someone who did not recognize what was being argued for and against. Since this account assumes